Hi again. Kenneth Scott Latourette, chapter 16 of A History of Christianity, renewed and continued progress in the expansion of Christianity. Last time we discussed how the Viking invasions of Britain ended up with the Danish and the Norwegians, and later the Scandinavians to some extent, I should say the Swedes, not Scandinavians, becoming Christian. And one of the ironies of history, really. In the same way that Islam, conquest of parts of Europe, led ultimately to the barbarians who took advantage of this, and they themselves became Christian. That is, the barbarians that invaded Rome too also became Christian later. So, how God uses history to his gospel's advantage. In this section, we're concentrating on Norway. In Norway, the course of conversion was more spectacular than in Denmark. Harald Fairhair, who died in 933, a pagan, by much fighting, had made himself master of most of Norway and begun the establishment of a monarchy which would rule over that land. His son and successor, Haakon the Good, had been reared in the English court as a Christian. He tried to win his people to his faith, but the opposition of the landowners proved too strong for him. Not many years after Haakon's death, Harald Bluetooth of Denmark made himself Lord of Norway and sought to spread Christianity in the land, but without much success. More effective were the brief efforts of a great-grandson of Harald Fairhair, Olaf Tryggvason, a posthumous child born about 963 or 964. From boyhood, Olaf led an adventurous and colorful life. Early captured by the Vikings and sold as a slave, he was rescued by an uncle, adopted the life of a Viking, raided England, was baptized by a hermit on the Scilly Islands of the southwest coast of that land, and was confirmed by the Bishop of Winchester. He was handsome, he was huge of stature, daring, fearless. He was the embodiment of the Viking ideal. In 995, he returned to Norway and there was elected king. He set about bringing all the Norwegians to acknowledge him and to receive baptism. The two processes seem to have gone hand in hand. He accomplished them by persuasion where possible and by force where necessary. Now and again he destroyed pagan temples and slew members of the opposition. Most of the land was nominally Christian when, in the year 1000, he perished in a great naval battle with the Danes, Swedes, and his Norwegian opponents. The conversion of Norway was completed and the church planted by another Olaf, Olaf Haraldsson, or Saint Olaf. Like the other Olaf, a posthumous child, he was also of the lineage of Harald Fairhair. Stocky, strong, skillful in sports, good to look upon, fair of hair, ruddy of face, keen of mind, with eyes before which, when they lighted up in anger, strong men quailed. He was a born leader of men. At the age of 12, he began his Viking career. He fought in England and France and raided the shores of Sweden. In his early 20s, in 1015, he went to Norway to claim the throne, defeated his enemies, and was rapidly acknowledged by thing after thing, the thing being the local assembly, by the way. That's the name, apparently, in those days, the thing. Once securely in power, Olaf sought to make his realm Christian, not only in name, but also in fact. Priests and bishops from England aided him in instructing his people. But not all these were strictly foreigners, for from their names it appears that 3 of the 4 bishops from England had Scandinavian blood in their veins. He traveled through the land to see that churches were built and priests set over them. He framed laws on what he believed to be Christian principles, prescribing paganism and customs which were contrary to Christian morals. Yet even he did not bring about the baptism of all his subjects. Many local magnates opposed him, partly because of his attempt to increase the royal power at the expense of their authority, and partly because his suppression of the pagan shrines, which were their property, and from which came much of their revenues and prestige. Aided by Canute of Denmark, they rose in rebellion, and in a battle in 1030, Olaf was slain. A revulsion of popular feeling swept Olaf to canonization. Miracles were soon reported to have been wrought in his tomb. Churches were erected in his honor, and he became the patron saint of the realm. Although the formal conversion of Norway may be said to have been completed by the time of Olaf's death, the instruction of the populace in the tenets of the faith and the development of an organization for the church required many decades. Monks and secular priests from England were of assistance. The Skuld, the bard who was an accepted figure or feature of the old order, spread the message through his songs, and respected laymen who were committed to the new faith gave it prestige. By the latter part of the 11th century, the country had a diocesan organization. The division of the area into parishes and the provision of local clergy proceeded, although only gradually. Diocesan boundaries usually conformed to pre-Christian political divisions. The Archbishop of Hamburg attempted to exercise jurisdiction, but the king angrily objected and insisted on having his bishops consecrated in France or England. In 1152, Norway was given an archiepiscopal see of its own, and its church thereby achieved the kind of national status which prevailed in several other kingdoms of Europe. Technically, this was within the structure of the Catholic Church of the West, over which the Pope was supreme, but Rome was far away and its power not so effective as in the nearer lands. The last of the three Scandinavian kingdoms fully to enter the Christian fold was Sweden. Christians were to be found there at least as early as the 9th century, and Anskar visited the land more than once. By 936, such Christian communities as had existed seemed to have disappeared, but the faith was soon renewed. Many Swedes who had been in England as merchants or soldiers and had been baptized there returned home. In the second half of the 10th century, there were bishops in Sweden. Early in the 11th century, a Swedish king, Olaf Skotkonung, was baptized and inaugurated a bishopric under the jurisdiction of the See of Hamburg-Bremen. Although most of the land was still pagan and the main shrine of the old worship was maintained as formerly at Uppsala, missionaries from England were preaching the new faith. As was to be expected, and as was true in Norway, Christianity triumphed first in the south, nearer to Christendom, and paganism lingered longest in the north. It was not until the first decades of the 12th century that Christianity was dominant. Monasticism entered through the Cistercians, who, as we are to see, represented a revival of that movement. When in 1164 Sweden was given its own archiepiscopal see, its first incumbent was a Cistercian. Its seat was placed at Uppsala, and the cathedral was erected on the site of the head temple of the pre-Christian pagan cult. Thus was Christianity clearly victor, and not in lax form, but headed by a member of that order, then young, which represented one of the latest and strictest attempts to conform fully to the Christian ideal. Next time, the spread of Christianity in Scandinavian outposts in the Atlantic, such as Greenland and Iceland. I'll put in a link to how Rome's fall, the barbarians who conquered Rome or took up the pieces of the broken Rome, the barbarians then helped spread Christianity to the rest of Europe and beyond, even as Islam conquers lands already Christian at the very same moment. Also put in a link to the Latourette playlist, A History of Christianity. See you next time.